Congressman Wenstrup. But first, let's go right to Congressman Wenstrup this morning. Congressman, I'm so glad to have you back on. Last time I saw you, we were in studio, but obviously with the breaking news over the weekend, it was a weekend of a marathon voting, if you will, on amendments. But it's official. The Senate has now passed the Inflation Reduction Act. And I know Republicans have been saying for a while, how in the world is this going to reduce inflation? Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, thanks for that lead-in, because that's the number one question: is how does this reduce inflation? And it never really is addressed. This is a huge increase in the federal government's role in our lives. You know, you just look at things like 87,000 new IRS agents, and I don't think anyone in America looks at the IRS and says, "Oh, these are our friends, and we can't wait to hear from them." You know, because this is a situation where you're always guilty until proven innocent. But they're doing things like drug price controls, which will be very devastating to our whole healthcare arena in many ways. You know, I always want to look at a bill and consider, does it make Americans more free? And will the next generation say thank you? And I don't think we're going to see that with what's coming on here. And I don't know where you want to go first, because there's so much in this bill
right.
That we could talk about. Go ahead.
No, sorry, Congressman, it's interesting because you just rattled off a bunch of stuff. And I'm like, yes, let's start with this first. Congressman Brad Wenstrup is with us from the 2nd District here in Ohio. You know, you talked about, let's start first with the IRS agents. We know that was one of the visions for the Biden administration and Democrats on how to raise more money, is to go after people with taxes. So they're hiring, 87,000 more new IRS agents. Yet, Congressman, the U.S. military is struggling to recruit troops. You have the Border Patrol that's running short of agents. There's an argument there. But that seems to be one of the game plans, is to, hey, let's just beef up the IRS.
Yeah, and think about this. So many people are having trouble hiring people today. That's one thing that we have to deal with. So who's sitting around saying, if only I could be an IRS agent? And also, you know, you have a large volume of American people that have decided for whatever reason not to get vaccinated. So now you're talking about only vaccinated people, because these are government positions and you can't get them if you haven't been vaccinated, in spite of the fact that you may have more immunity from having had COVID than those that got vaccinated. But where are all these people going to come from for these jobs, and how do you get them in place where it could even possibly make a difference? You know, and again, these agencies act in punitive ways. They don't reach out to you and say, hey, let us help you prepare your taxes more effectively and more efficiently. So that's one right there. And what we do see is that it seems that, you know, the people that are getting audited, and you know there's a cost when you get audited. And so I think low-income taxpayers making up to $25,000 a year may be audited. How can they afford to go through this? This is really going to be an interesting thing to see play out. First of all, you're going to get the agents, and what are you going to do with them, and who's going to be affected? I think the majority of the burden is going to fall on the middle class. And it's been estimated that nearly half of the audits would be going to Americans making $75,000 or less. This is a tremendous strain on a lot of Americans trying to make it.
Congressman Brad Wenstrup is with us from the 2nd District. Brad, I know that as far as raising taxes on the heels of what we were just talking about with the IRS, the proposal would implement a 15% corporate minimum tax aimed at large companies. But we also know that when it comes to that argument, all corporations are going to do, and they've done this since the beginning of time, is to pass that cost along to consumers like you and I.
Yeah, that's always the way that it is. And so you may, for a very brief moment in time, see an increase in revenue to the government, but at the same time, that's only going to drive inflation, right? It's only going to increase prices. These are not novel ideas. These are not things that aren't proven to be negative when you do this. Look, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that we implemented decreased taxes, made us more competitive in the world. More people went to work, and in essence, more people were paying taxes because they were working. They weren't paying more taxes individually, but they were more people paying taxes, and our companies were thriving. This does just the opposite, and at a terrible time, too, at a time when our supply chain is in need of great repair because too many things are made out of the country, and we can't supply ourselves, and so now we're making us less competitive. And the games that they played with small businesses is even more cruel in this bill.
Congressman, I want to get to healthcare in just a sec because there's obviously opposing views on that. But before we get to that, let's talk about, the ground zero here, inflation. You have the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, that they found that the package would reduce the deficit by about $102 billion over a decade. Yet you have Republicans that are arguing, and they pointed out analysis. I read this from the Penn-Wharton budget model, and that finds that it really is going to have little impact on inflation.
Yeah, these are some very educated people that aren't getting listened to, that have said these types of things, that it's not going to make a difference. You cite the Penn-Wharton model. It's all there. Let's keep in mind that this also creates an energy tax, raising fees and taxes on oil production and methane gas. There's no doubt that leads to higher gas prices, larger heating bills, higher consumer prices across the board. I mean, you have in this thing Green New Deal tax credits of, I think one estimate I saw was $257 billion. And then Solyndra, if you remember that deal, loan guarantees for things in the green world,
right,
up to $250 billion, which will worsen inflation. And now they're going to subsidize luxury electric vehicles. Look, I have no problem with people wanting an electric vehicle, but you need to be able to pay for it. Most Americans can't.
But right.
So,
correct, Congressman. We know that the average American cannot possibly afford even the lowest tier of a Tesla, if you will. Congressman Brad Wenstrup is with us from the 2nd District here in Ohio. To add to that, the package would spend roughly $369 billion on climate and energy programs. As you mentioned, would give tax credits for buying electric and hydrogen vehicles, make energy efficient homes, improvements. But what I know you can't get in the head of a Joe Manchin from West Virginia, but this seems to go against everything that is represented in West Virginia, or maybe it used to be, because they're penalizing the traditional energy companies, if you will, fossil fuel companies, taxing them, raising fees, and taxing them.
Yeah, it does not make any sense. Does he forget where he's from? Because West Virginia is certainly not going to be in favor of this, and yet he was the hero for a while, right, as he's holding out, but now he's seemingly to be the guy who's going to make this all happen. And, when you look at the taxes on energy, that's going to be crushing for West Virginia in so many ways. And, the administration likes to say that the companies, the gas companies, etc., are gouging the American people. Right now, this is our government gouging the American people in many, many ways with these taxes. And what they've done with this prescription drug plan is extremely dangerous. It's going to launch the higher launch prices that are going to come out of this, because they're capping prescription drug costs, is going to be crazy. And this is going to lead to a loss of innovation. I mean, I'm telling you, Brandon, if you're waiting for a cure and waiting for a new medicine, it ain't going to happen. If you think back, if you know somebody who is living with HIV, if this was intact 40 years ago, they would be dead. We have a cure for hepatitis C today. Drugs like this would no longer be brought to the table or brought to the floor because of the way they have schemed this and starting to control prices. If you cannot recover what you invest in your research and development, then it stops, or you leave the United States of America, and that makes things even worse. What's even worse about this drug plan is it really robs from Medicare monies. So monies that are sitting in Medicare are now going to be taken out, and you know where they're going? They're going to pay the insurance premiums for people, some of them, very wealthy, and the premiums are going right to the insurance companies. So we're robbing Medicare to pay insurance companies as they increase their premiums on people in the Affordable Care Act. You can't make this up.
Congressman,
that's exactly what's happening.
Congressman, I want to play you a quick clip of GOP Senator Mike Rounds, who had this to say yesterday, adding to what you were saying about, drugs and lowering the cost.
They're going to take money from Medicare, put it into Obamacare, but at the same time, they're saying that they're going to tell the drug companies that you have to sell it for less to the federal government. But first of all, it doesn't start for 4 years. And second of all, once it does start, what do you think the drug companies are going to be doing when they start being dictated to? And by the way, this is not a negotiation. This is where the federal government literally walks on in and says, if you want to provide any prescriptions here, we will tell you how much we will pay, period, end of story. And if you don't like it, there's a huge, huge tax burden that we will inflict upon you. This is not healthy, it's not good, and it will cause problems in the marketplace.
So, Congressman, just to educate me, because I just want to try to understand this more. I know Republicans stripped a $35 insulin price cap from the Dems bill, but then they blamed it on a technicality. And again, I know that's the Senate and you're in the House, but can you explain a little bit more? Because you're also in the medical field. Why is that? Why strip that insulin price cap?
The whole plan is somewhat flawed, and I'm not exactly sure what their thinking was on stripping the insulin price cap, because first of all, we want to keep people as healthy as we possibly can, but also, we're interested in a free market onset. But the policy remaining in the bill institutes a $35 cap on monthly cost sharing for insulin price for Medicare. The policy spends an estimated additional $6 billion further, reducing the claimed deficit reductions, but it does nothing to expand supply or reduce high prices. Supply is, I think, one of the things that we really want to see put in there. So that, I think, is part of the situation. But this is things that are following the parliamentarians' ruling in the final negotiations. So keep in mind with this deal with the Senate, with reconciliation, the parliamentarian can say whether you can or can't do certain things based on the rule, the Byrd rule. I mean, we could really get into the weeds on this, obviously.
I'm sure.
But I would tell you, overall, as a physician, I'm just extremely concerned about what is taking place with these drug pricing plans, because first of all, it's an Obamacare bailout, which is ridiculous. And as you said, there's the clip plate, there's a 95% excise tax if you don't adhere to their price fixing. And he said it right. It's not a negotiation. It's a dictation. And so one off-ramp that was put in there is they can now pull their products from Medicare. Well, that means that seniors don't get it unless they pay out of pocket.
Okay.
This is not where we want to go. I mean, people's lives have improved so much in my time in medicine with new innovations and new drugs. And actually, those new innovations and new drugs save us money in the long run, because you have people that aren't hospitalized anymore. You have people that aren't having surgeries that they needed before because the medications are doing so well. So there's a lot of things that we have to consider, and this is just going in the wrong direction. Sure. And as a doctor's caucus, and we have 18 members on the House side, and then we included all the healthcare providers on the Senate side, and we put forward a statement just spelling out how bad this can be. And we join with the Senate in expressing our grave concerns to Chuck Schumer and Pelosi and pointing it out. And I don't know if we can win some people over on the House side and maybe defeat this thing. But if, the way it's been with the Democrats on the House side, they just go lockstep. So some of them wonder why they're being targeted.
So, Congressman, there's still time to clean this up a bit when it goes to the House with you.
Yeah, that would be the hope.
Okay.
That we can. So I can tell you right now that we're gathering ourselves together after seeing what the Senate put out and trying to figure out how we may be able to do that, if at all.
Congratulations on the PACT Act. I know that passed last week with helping those service members who were exposed to burn pits. I know that's been a really crucial need. Congressman, I don't have a lot of time left, but just out of curiosity, you were one of 4 congressmen in Ohio who didn't vote for the CHIPS Act. I've heard both sides, and both are very interesting arguments for and against. Can I get your take on why you decided not to vote for it?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we have a plan that we would like to see that is much better, which certainly would have the same positive implications. And, certainly this is good for Ohio. There's no doubt about it with Intel coming. That's not an issue. But this is picking, in many ways, winners and losers. And so when you look at that and you see what's being spent, it's being spent in a very targeted way, which we need to do because our supply chain is a mess. But we could have done this in a more global way, where anybody can use this rather than just chips and semiconductors. And I think that that's a part of it. And it certainly is, arguably a handout, if you will. But I also think it's the way that we have to go. So it was tough, and I think that Ohio was split in many ways. I'm certainly for Intel coming, and I do want that to happen, and I do think the government needs to be involved when it comes to our supply chain, and especially chips. There's probably a better way of doing it, but we'll see where we go in the future, because I'd like to have a more fair and equitable way of providing for our nation, especially when it comes to our national security and our national health security.
Congressman Brad Wenstrup, physician, Army reservist, and he represents Ohio's 2nd District. Congressman, good to have you on, and we'll have you back on soon, okay? Thanks for your time.
Yeah, any